Hi everybody, what's going on? Welcome to Sit Down. I'm DJ Sixsmith. Pleasure to be joined by Emilio Estevez. How are you, man?
Thank you. Thanks, DJ. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. Your brand new movie is The Public. Checked it out last night. Really powerful film, and you packed a lot in there. And you were saying beforehand, like you just like to go big when it comes to your projects. So this was 12 years in the making for you. So how cool is it to see all of this come together finally?
Well, I see life epically, and I see my films epically, even when I have non-epic budgets. So I have a tendency to spend $10 like it's 10,000 because I believe that, you know, again, not that I'm irresponsible with the financing, but I just see it differently. I have a bigger idea for the film, and I see my life and the lives of the people that I want to make movies about in sort of widescreen. And so that when you think big, that means more extras, bigger sets, more actors, so all of that sort of factors into when I step up and make a film, which is why I don't make too many of them.
You like to take your time.
I like to take my time. This was a long time. This was too long, frankly. This took 12 years. Actually, 12 years this week.
Wow.
So it was, I wrote the script after being inspired by a piece in the LA Times. It was written by a former Salt Lake City librarian. He was retiring. He basically, the essay was about how libraries have become de facto homeless shelters, how librarians are now first responders and de facto social workers. And so I was really moved by the piece. And I started to imagine, well, what would it look like if the patrons on a particularly cold night said, we're not leaving.
Yeah, screw it. We're staying here.
We're going to stay because this is where we live anyway.
Power in numbers, too, yeah.
That's right. So let's stage an old-fashioned 60s or Occupy Wall Street type situation. Let's stage that. How would law enforcement react? Would they continue to criminalize and marginalize the poor? How would they, figure out how to diffuse this? How would the media react? How would they spin it?
Right.
And how would a local politician who might be in the middle of an election cycle, how would he spin it for his own personal political gain? So all of those things, imagine 10 years ago, before they were part of the conversation that we're having now on the daily.
Yeah.
So all of these things I've been watching unfold in real time over these years. So it's been terribly frustrating for me to say, how am I not making this movie? How is this not? Am I the only one who sees this?
Well, what were the biggest challenges at first in terms of getting it made? I mean, you mentioned distributor when we were talking, but what else were the
So
challenges?
much of it is the funding. I mean, again, when you go out into Hollywood, then you're taking meetings at various studios, mini studios, major studios, executives, money guys, financiers. You say, well, here's the story. And they say, well, okay. You're going to make a movie about the library, and you're going to make a movie about homelessness and mental health issues, and it doesn't push the blockbuster button. And so they want a sure thing. The problem with so many people in Hollywood is that there's no such thing as a sure thing. Nobody knows anything, which is the famous quote. So, the fact that this movie got made is a testament to the hard work of the people who believed in it, who got behind it. So many folks that didn't give us their support in the beginning have now sort of said, "Oh, that's what you were going for.
I'm
oh,
sure they're
there's humor.
Now.
Oh, there's because I don't think people saw the humor.
No,
it was very funny.
It is really funny. Great writing,
surprisingly
and really
funny.
witty. Yeah.
And there's a lot of payoffs, and the audience is really rewarded. It's not like toilet humor. It's not, oh, haha, yuck, yuck.
No, it's smart humor.
It's rewarded. The audience is rewarded later on, and the jokes pay off.
Right, but if you're selling homelessness, the library, that's not sexy stuff that's jumping off the page. It's not funny stuff initially.
No, initially it's not. And so again, it's sort of showing folks how this can be done, how you can send a message without it looking like a message, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Like I like broccoli and kale salad, but I don't want to eat it every day, and most people don't want to eat it because it's good for you.
Right.
But
it's not super delicious.
So I kind of made a gluten-free cheesecake with this film. So it's like, oh, cheesecake, great. Oh, it's also gluten-free, great.
I like that analogy there.
Right.
So let's talk about your character, Stuart, because, I mean, you've played many interesting characters in your career, but here's a guy that once was of the streets. He's cleaned his life up. He's working every day, and then all of a sudden he has a major life decision to make. So how did you prepare for the role, and how cool was it to play this role?
So, the role really took a lot of turns during the course of the writing of the screenplay. And, over these 10 years, 12 years now since we finished the film, it's been so we initially in the first draft he was not sober. He was not one of the individuals experiencing homelessness. He was on the other side. And so over time, it just made sense. And doing more research, and in fact, there was a book. It's a photographic essay that was done by a guy named Robert Dawson. Okay. And he and his son traveled across the country, and they took photographs of libraries from the West Coast all the way east.
Oh wow!
And so, and peppered throughout the photographs are essays written by like Bill Moyers and Chip Ward, and one particularly interesting essay was by Luis Herrera, who was the San Francisco city librarian, and he told the story of this guy who was illiterate, was alcoholic, addict, and on the street, and he came to the San Francisco Public Library and asked for help. He says, "I need to learn how to read." So they said, "You need to get sober first." So he did. He got clean and sober. He partnered with an adult mentor, studied for 2 years to learn how to read. And when he was 44 years old, he read his first book.
Wow.
He now works at the San Francisco Public Library.
That's
so
amazing.
that story in that book was a lot of the inspiration and informed the character of Stuart, and I think really broadened and deepened that role.
Yeah, and it deepens the movie too, because you have the whole addiction angle, not only with your character, but other characters around.
That's right.
Son of Alec Baldwin's character, that's like a whole different layer to it. So why was it important for you to address that as well in the film?
Well, I think that, again, the movie addresses some of the most important issues of our time. Climate crisis, homelessness, addiction, mental health issues, and it all happens and intersects underneath the roof of the library.
Yeah.
And so you can't go into a public library these days and not see all of these issues playing out.
And especially if you spend a good couple hours in there, you can see it all unfold, no matter where you are in the country.
It doesn't matter
rich
where you
or
go.
poor, it doesn't matter.
That's right. That's right. And the great thing about the library, it's like it's the great sort of equalizer.
Yeah. Totally.
Where class stratification doesn't exist.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
And Alec Baldwin actually put it perfectly yesterday. He says, in the library, there's no first class. Right? There's no first class seating. It's all Southwest Airlines.
That's really true. There you go. So let's talk about you as a director, because this has been a bug for you since you've been young. So you think big picture. So who are the guys that you look to early on in terms of the directors that did it on a big level?
So I fortunately or unfortunately, I grew up on big movie sets. When I left New York in 1969, we went directly from New York to Mexico, where I watched Mike Nichols direct Catch-22.
Oh, wow.
Not a great movie, but it's certainly epic.
Sure.
And it had everybody in. Orson Welles in it, John Voight was in it, Alan Arkin, Martin Balsam, Paula Prentice.
And
then
how
my
old
dad.
were you at this point?
I was 6 years old.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm on set watching these B-52s take off, and Mike Nichols directing it. Art Garfunkel was in it. I loved Art Garfunkel. It was like, oh my God. So so for me, at 6 years old, I'm watching all of this madness unfold on this enormous scale. A few years later, I'm 10 years old, I'm in La Junta, Colorado, watching Terrence Malick direct Badlands. Again, epic scale. Even though it was a small, independent film, Terry's vision is enormous. 4 years later, I'm in the Philippines, watching Francis Coppola direct Apocalypse Now.
Wow.
Obviously an epic film, obviously an epic scale. It was intended to be that. But so where I really had the advantage of watching these directors at work.
Yeah, you're on the front lines right there.
On the front lines, dug in and watching them create their art. And so for me, even as I went off to direct movies that and create stories that had limited budgets, limited resources, I always thought of the big screen. It's when people say, well, there's streaming services now and there's cable TV, and it's very difficult for me to think about a small screen experience when I grew up with that. With that sort of
that was the main focus.
That's right.
And it didn't change for several decades, and so for you to kind of change, I'm sure, is a hard thing to do. But
Yes.
I think people are still finding their ways to make these bigger productions, just doing it for different outlets, like you said.
For sure they are. I still believe in the shared experience of being in a dark movie theater.
Right, you're old school
with
like that.
200.
As opposed to watching on Netflix.
Yeah, man, and I would say that there is enough empirical evidence to support that.
Absolutely.
In the fact that I have now taken this movie across the country. I've screened it in 30 different cities. I've screened it for small venues where there's 150 to 200 people, and large venues. We screened in Cincinnati on Friday night to 2,400 people.
That's awesome.
Toronto, 2,500 people, and it's that shared experience of sitting in the theater and sitting next to a stranger and getting the same joke and having that connection.
Yeah,
that
totally.
I think is just, I don't believe that's ever going to go away. I still think
it's the fabric of our culture, you know, and we need that. We need, in a world where it's kind of this alone together method, you're at Starbucks, you're sitting next to people with your AirPods, we need the connection with
and
people.
And popcorn farmers need it too.
Popcorn farmers, most importantly.
Of the popcorn
we gotta
farmers.
think about them, the butter, the popcorn.
Exactly, but where would the dairy industry, they'd go in the toilet if it wasn't for all that wonderful butter that they put on that.
Yeah.
It's not wonderful.
No,
but anyway.
It's a little bit too much.
Right.
But you mentioned Francis Ford Coppola. So you watched him with Apocalypse Now. You work with him.
Yeah, 4 years after Apocalypse Now, I'm on set with him.
So what was that experience like for you when you worked with him?
So Francis, that was a very interesting time because he was directing from an Airstream, and so he put two big speakers on the set, and he was that was during Betamax, if you so he was cutting the movie while we were shooting it.
Wow.
Not only that, in the 2 weeks before we made the movie, we would play out every scene on in front of a green screen, and so he says, "Well, you're going to sit there, and I'll put the park behind you. I'll put the house behind you. Just sit on the floor, sit on that chair." And so we had rehearsed the entire movie and shot the film several times before we actually showed up on set to work. So that was an interesting experience.
So you knew like the back of your hand at that point.
We did, but it was, you know, when you imagine yourself as a young actor, I want to be on set with Francis Ford Coppola. He's going to be taking me through my paces, and he's going to be directing. It's
Not
like,
exactly.
All of a sudden, you're just looking, and there's a speaker on the set. It's like, where's Coppola?
That's crazy.
But he was into a whole nother, you know, technology.
Right.
And
has anything else compared to that experience?
No.
I think that's one of a kind.
It was pretty odd, and the audition process for that film was absolutely brutal. He put everybody in a room. It was like we were like gladiators, and we all got to see each other's auditions. And I could do it better than him, or God, I'm not as good as him, and we fought it out. And little by little, he just distilled it down to a core group, and then he brought that LA core group here to New York. And we're in another gladiator situation. We're fighting it out with the New York actors.
That's a really interesting human experience there.
It was outrageous.
Wow.
And it went on for months.
That's crazy. And how long was the filming for that movie?
I believe I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma for about 3 months.
Yeah, that's like the biggest difference. So Molly Ringwald was here a couple months back, and she said The Breakfast Club was like 6, 8 months, something like that for you guys?
We were in Chicago. I got there in January. I finished like a few days after my birthday in May. So it was a long process. It was always, when you're a young actor, at least this was the norms were, you showed up and you gave 2 weeks for free. 2 weeks of rehearsal for free. So by the time you did get on set, you knew the whole movie. Now, you know, you're on set and actors are coming in and they're giving these little sides and they're learning their lines on the set. I'm thinking, well, what is this? Where's the
totally
discipline?
Different world for you. Yeah. And I'm sure it's interesting for you to work with younger actors who've been exposed to this world their whole lives, but for you, you had to know everything before you got to the set.
That's right.
Does it frustrate you?
It does, especially since I've had the pleasure of working with Sir Anthony Hopkins now twice. Hopkins knows your lines, their lines, their lines.
He's like the quarterback
his
who knows
own lines.
everything. Yeah.
And the first, I did a very terrible movie with him, the first one anyway. But he shows up on set, and the director says, "Well, you know, let's get together and rehearse what you know, tomorrow or the next day's work." It's great. So I have my script, and the other actors have their script. The director has a script, and Tony's just standing there. Okay, and we start to rehearse, and the director says, "Well, don't you need your script?" He says, "No, I got it. Okay, it's good." And he shamed us. Shamed us. His level of professionalism was just unparalleled, and it was a real lesson in not just knowing everyone else's lines, but just his commitment and how prepared he was, and I was very taken by that.
Yeah, no, that's a major
that's
statement
rare.
There. Yeah,
and then we were fortunate enough to work. He came to join us on Bobby years later, and we talked specifically about that, about his process, and he'll read the script 100, 200 times before he shows up on set.
You need
that's
that
just the
commitment.
norm for him.
Right. So you went a major deep dive on Bobby. back in '06. You spent a lot of time at the library, is what I read.
Right.
You know, when we think about Bobby Kennedy now, I mean, it seems like he's kind of getting his due, whereas in '06, maybe you were a little premature with it. So how do you reflect on that experience? Do you think it would have worked a little better maybe 2018, 2019?
Yeah, I hate being ahead of my time.
Honestly, though.
I hate it. It's just a nightmare. It's
think about it.
And I don't even consider myself that prescient.
No, but if it was today, it's a totally different reaction, especially around the anniversary of the death.
I agree. Yeah. So
how are you supposed to know that?
You don't know. And again, let's go back to nobody knows anything.
Yeah, that's the name of the game.
Nobody knows anything. Yeah. Do I believe that movie would find a different and perhaps a broader audience now? Absolutely. Absolutely, but now we have the public. And I think that whether it's The War Home or Bobby or even The Way, which is a movie that is not similar to the public or Bobby, but it is about human connection.
Absolutely.
It is about our shared humanity. It is about our shared sense of loss and trauma. So I believe that those works were really informed where the public ultimately landed and how it landed and the timing of it.
Yeah.
So I think that, yeah, we can lament that, you know, Bobby may be ahead of its time. We can lament that The Way found its audience much later. But now let's talk about this movie in the context of where we are today. And perhaps there's a little bit of a makeup that's going on right now.
It's interesting how that happens because movies can have a second bounce. Like this movie, I think, is perfect for 2019.
Right.
Your movies in the 80s, perfect for that time.
That's right.
Even like the Mighty Ducks movies, like perfect for the 90s.
I agree.
You know? Kids grew up with those.
That's right.
Like, what were your expectations for the Mighty Ducks movies when you were making those?
You know, listen, I had to learn how to skate for that film.
Yeah, well,
of course,
did you have any hockey background or anything
no,
like
nothing.
that?
I skated once at Woolman Rink when I was 6.
Wow.
Of course, I sat down with the director-producer and said, "Can you skate?" Oh, yeah.
Like, sure.
Yeah, sure. And then left the meeting, got in my car, found a skating rink in LA, which is not
That's
an
a hard
easy
thing
feat.
to do. Yeah.
And I walked in, I begged the guy, I was like, listen, I just think I got this movie, and I told him I could skate, and you have 3 weeks to teach me how. So that was, because I didn't want the kids to make fun of me.
No, that
and I knew that
they
would. But yeah, on the Ducks, we didn't. It was a small movie. It was sort of a programmer for Disney.
Right.
They didn't have any real high expectations for it, and boom, it becomes this hit. And then the next thing, it becomes this team, and then it becomes a business for the studio. Yeah, nobody could have seen that coming.
It's crazy how you've defined guys in the 80s, the 90s, people today.
Right.
Like that must be a fascinating thing for you with all your projects.
But it's not by design.
Right.
And
you're just looking to tell stories.
Well, also too, it's just like you say yes to something or someone says yes to you. Right. As a young actor, you got cast because they said yes, and 10 other directors and companies or commercials and TV shows said no.
Right.
Right. So that you just don't know where you're going to land. Later on, you say yes to things because it shifts.
So was that the case with Ducks?
Yeah, I said yes because I thought the script was,
like, why not?
was charming and, you know, yeah.
Sports movie, you can check that off the bucket list.
Yeah, if you could do that, great. But that it became something else was not part of the original plan, for sure.
Yeah, it's always fascinating how that happens.
But you're right. I do think that the public is this at this time.
It was worth the wait,
it's
honestly.
A perfect movie for our time, and I'm really proud of my cast. I mean, again, I'm surrounded by
Michael K. Williams
Michael
was
K.
fantastic.
And
Taylor Schilling.
Taylor's amazing.
Even all the
Union,
other,
Alec is really strong. We get to see him in a dramatic role. You know, so how often is he now? You know, do we see him in these comedic roles?
Right, we see him on SNL,
and all of a sudden,
no, he's got real acting chops.
We're reminded how good of an actor he is and how solid of an actor he is. And his first scene with the police chief asking for him for time off so he can go look for his son who's on the streets is just like,
it's heart-wrenching.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And how many parents are suffering and dealing with that.
Exact thing. And to do it in Ohio also, where the opioid epidemic has really hit home there.
That's right.
So.
No, that's right.
It's on a lot of different things. Well, Emilio, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Why don't you tell everybody where they can check the film out?
The public opens April 5th in theaters all across the country. Go check it out. Thank you.
There you have it. Emilio Estevez. We'll see you next time here on The Sit Down.